Welcome to episode 28 of our Sunday Conversation, presented by FingerLakes1.com. Fall is here, and after a couple weeks off, we are back with a full schedule right here through Election Day. Of course, not all of our upcoming episodes will be election or campaign related, but this week's discussion is our first involving the 23rd Congressional District. Congressman Tom Reid, a Republican, has a challenger. Romulus resident Casey McDonald has been no stranger to the political scene this year, having made headlines when he initiated a local challenge to former state Republican Chair Ed Cox. McDonald understands that defeating Reid will be a tall order in next year's primary. We discussed that point and many others while he was in studio. Before we get to that conversation, though, I'd like to thank today's show sponsor, DeSanto Propane. Don't go with a company that pretends to be locally owned with a name that sounds familiar. Go with the team that is locally owned and operated and has been serving upstate New York since 1937. Over the last 80 years, DeSanto has developed a reputation for reliability and dependability that sets them apart from the competition. Quick turnaround times, on-time deliveries, and a fourth-generation family-owned business. To learn more, call 800-752-4574. Now, today's Sunday Conversation with Casey McDonald. Casey, welcome back to the program. It has been not that long.
6 months.
6 months.
Hasn't
It's
it?
been 6 months. I think, yeah, it's been about that.
March.
Yeah. So let's start with, obviously, now you are a candidate for Congress.
How about that?
Officially.
How about that?
What was the decision process like?
Well, first off, we have a private citizen as president. And that's a remarkable and rare thing, a non-politician as president. Okay, so that means that the genius that we normally think about as to how to fix government is not tainted by political considerations. Okay, so here's the guy saying whatever he wants, saying the way that he says it, saying it in a style that is, early baby boomers, which has a certain sense of humor, a certain sharpness, a certain sarcasm to it that is not understood by the current, millennial filter. And his objectives are very, very clear as to what he wants to do. Reduce the size of government, rearrange some of our trade agreements, have the world kind of understand that we're in a new paradigm, a paradigm that makes sense rather than political hay. So here's this wonderful guy, right? Donald Trump, love him. He influenced me to buy the Seneca Falls Hospital. I'm kayaking down there, and I wanted to buy property on Van Cleef Lake, and he inspired me just through his voice, saying, a problem will come up. He say, well, what are you going to do about it, Casey? Come on, this is the problem. Solve the problem or you're fired. You know what I mean? Kind of thing, and it just inspired me that it was possible to do. I just needed to figure out how to do it. Okay, fast forward. He's elected president. I'm going, oh my gosh. Never did we have a clearer choice between a career politician who had, granted, huge amounts of baggage. Add to it, here's Comey, right, who later became quite influential in the witch hunt against Trump. Yet, he announces something a few days before the election that tainted Hillary's chances in a very, very close race. What was that about? What was it about the FBI, the Justice Department, acting like a fourth branch of government to influence elections much more than the Russians ever could or ever did? And it was quite extraordinary. Long story short, the guy gets elected, okay? So we have this first election cycle, the midterms of his coming up. Now, I was helping an individual in Pennsylvania to run for Congress, and part of my opposition research focused in on this group called Problem Solvers. It turns out that my congressman, Tom Reid, was the head of that group. So as I did additional research on it, it really ticked me off quite a bit. And I learned about it a little bit too late to run in the previous election cycle, the 2018, the midterm cycle. So, and I didn't want to impact his chances of winning or losing by tainting the waters and doing a premature campaign, okay? But that election ends. I announced my run for the New York State Republican Committee chairmanship as kind of an experiment to see how much opposition would I receive if I legitimately ran for something big. How much election law conflict would I, drum up? And it turned out to be quite significant. So it turns out that Tom Reid, and this is impeccable research, well documented on my website. Now, I tell people my website is caseymcdonald.com, and then they can go to any one of my other interests, including my bed and breakfast, my pottery studio, my jazz entertainment, and my political website, of which there's two. There's a Life of the Party concept that we talked about 6 months ago, which is trying to raise awareness of what the parties are supposed to do. My knowledge of that has exponentially grown significantly. What I've seen, the tie-in between the judiciary and politics. A politicized judiciary is never more visible than in election law proceedings. All that aside, Tom Reid, who claims to be a conservative, is touted as a conservative, was in fact the gentleman that was the architect behind Republican opposition to Donald Trump's presidency. He recruited, financed, mobilized 24 Republicans to vote against Donald Trump. Now, we had, at the time, 47 more Republicans than Democrats. Well, if you take 24 Republicans and have them voting with the Democrats, that equals 48 votes, which gave the Democrats a one-vote lead. What began as the people saying, hey, we love Donald Trump and we love to give him a Congress that he can work with, that Tom Reid changed all that. So he did it under the watchful eye of the New York State Republican Committee. 4 other Republican congresspeople joined him in that effort. And they were the core then of this Problem Solvers Caucus, where their problem was a private citizen at the head of the government. And they wanted to stop him for any reason. So, yes, personalities and this and that, and there's some complaints, some are legit. But when it comes to policy, the policy of government for the people, Trump is doing a magnificent job. However, the swamp doesn't like that, because the swamp basically says, look, I'll get you guaranteed by the military $48 a gallon for biofuels. And it'll only cost you $100,000 for a campaign contribution to my campaign. And here's Tom Reid again, getting $100,000 from the biofuels industry. This is up and open. This is on the FEC. This is not the dark money that's being contributed. Again, dark money is basically C4 organizations like the NRA, Planned Parenthood. They all are able to give money. You can give money to those organizations, and that money, you will not be able to be doxxed. They won't be able to know what the source of that money is. Okay, so that dark money then is focused, and again, the FEC does a very fine job in telling us where that money's going. So, following the votes and following the money, and I realize I've had a long-term philosophy that the government that we get is the government that we can tolerate. Well, my toleration is very low, and there's an interesting thing where there's an opportunity. Okay? I live in the 23rd District. My congressman is the head of this anti-Trump Republican group. Okay? The king of the swing vote, the king of the Rhinos. So, there's an opportunity then to hold him accountable to that reality. So part of my process has been to educate the Republican committees as to what is actually going on. I would think I would meet outrage, but what's fascinating is I haven't. Instead, we see, just before I announce, 11 Republican chairs of their county committees for the 11 counties of the 23rd District. Because 23rd District is Seneca County all the way out to Jamestown, okay? It's not small, okay? All of them, without consulting their committees, unanimously endorse Tom Reid. Now, Tom knew through our program, because I did hint that I was running for Congress at that time, that I'm going to announce on July 13th, which was the day that he basically thumbed his nose at the Republican Party and they couldn't do anything, even with a vast majority of members, okay? So he did that in 2017. On July 13th, 5 separate votes that basically made the Republican majority irrelevant, okay? Biofuels was a big winner. A group that I call queer aggression was a big winner, okay? Queer aggression is different than all the other letters, okay? L. I know what L means. I can picture the Barbie dolls in certain positions, okay? G, I know what that means. B, T, but what is Q? What is queer? Queer, in my opinion, is the aggressive nature of the gay movement, how they target basically two separate groups. One is children, everybody younger than 13, through education, through coloring books, through propagandizing, role play, etc. And I know this because it's something that I fought many years ago, back in the early 90s. But then the other side of it is towards those that are ambitious in business, but especially in politics. So our governor, for instance, fully embraces queer aggression. Our Congressman, Tom Reid, fully embraces queer aggression. And on July 13th of 2017, there was the Hartzler Amendment, which basically said that funding for transsexual surgery would be prohibited for soldiers. Sex reassignment surgery would not be publicly funded. Every Republican voted with the Hartzler Amendment, but that amendment was defeated by Tom Reid and his 24, the dirty 24, okay? So when you think about the timing, we have a president who is going to win his second term. But who's going to replace him? Who's going to replace him? If we have a private citizen as president, the rarity that it is, that's doing incredible things for our country. That's making our country sustainable. In other words, this great giveaway of the swamp, you're going to give away corporately, you're going to give away internationally, but we're also going to give away to various classes of people, all right? So free education, free medical, free daycare, and on and on and on. They're competing to figure out what next can we give away, okay? So the timing is very narrow and absolutely perfect to do this, okay? Once the window closes, I don't know how many more opportunities I'll certainly have in my lifetime to have someone in the executive office who understands business the way that he does, who understands negotiation the way that he does, and is doing so many great things. And I'd like, and I believe that my neighbors would like, to see a congressional representative that supported that rather than attacked it, okay?
So one of the points that I would imagine a lot of our listeners are going to come back with is, well, wait a second, Trump endorsed Reid in 2018 in that midterm cycle.
He almost endorsed him after the election. He endorsed him 3 days prior to it.
Right.
He endorsed other people, very, very early.
So is that discounted then because of the late nature of it, or was it just sort of a reaction
Who were the two
to try and hold
candidates?
the...
Who were the two candidates you had to choose from?
Right.
Okay.
So you're suggesting that it was just a holding, ensure basically just to hold the district.
Well, it's quite interesting because here's Tom Reid, and he had the majority whip at his fundraiser. Scalise, the gentleman that was shot, remember? And it was a way of basically saying, come on, Tom, we can work together. We got money for you. You can still be part of what we're doing here, right? But again, what Reid did, and it's not widely known, is the point, okay? He's touted as a conservative. But again, if he's supporting queer aggression, which he is, if he's supporting big government, which he is, those are permissive socialistic agendas and not socially conservative, meaning family value, okay, and fiscally conservative, meaning a sustainable budget, not one that continually grows, that passes on down the road a problem that we are not even beginning to address, okay? So that's what Tom's doing. So yes, great, he's endorsed. He's endorsed over a Democrat. Why wouldn't he be? By a Republican president a few days prior. I mean, this was not, I'm coming to town to rally for you, any more than he did for Claudia Tenney. I mean, his son came and did what his son could do, but his son is not Donald Trump, okay? And that race was lost. Faso lost his seat. These are two Republicans. So realize, we have, in the current gerrymandered structure of New York State, out of 27 congressional districts, we have 10 that have more Republicans than Democrats. Of those 10, we won 5, just in terms of numbers. That means there's a certain distrust of Republican, okay? And Tom Reid is a perfect example as to why. If we understand a little bit about what's going on, what does he stand for? We know that Donald Trump stands for something, but what does Tom Reid stand for? When you actually look at the voting pattern, you can see that he stands for re-election, okay? That he's willing to sell his vote over and over again. And he's still doing it. And there's still no pushback from the state Republican committee. We have a new chairman. Our previous chairman, Mr. Cox, who was the son-in-law of Richard Nixon, you know, the only impeached Republican president in the United States, and we have his son-in-law as the spokesman for the party. I didn't think that was good branding to begin with. However, under the watchful eye of Mr. Cox, this problem solvers group, which is a terrible name for it, it should be, you know, the Republican Rhinos, you know, Republicans against Trump is really what it should be named, because that's how they voted. They never voted once for one initiative for Donald Trump. So it's supposed to be this bipartisan thing where you got 24 Republicans, 24 Democrats making sense, solving the problems of America, okay? But never have those Democrats voted with the Republican majority. It has always been a one-way street. And now, you would think, in a Democratic majority, the problem solvers would be the big power player, because we have these loyal Democrats who saw what good we did for them back in the 115th Congress, and now they owe us. But they never crossed the aisle. So instead, what do we see? We see Tom Reid, Katko, Stefanik, okay, all rural congressional reps in upstate New York, okay, voting on the most progressive issues as a tiny block. So they have different ways to signal to the House their availability, what I call the bipartisan, the BUY, the votes for sale, right? So in order to gain impeachment, right, they need 2/3 of the House to do that. Well, that means a little bit more than the 24. You need 27, 28, 29 Republicans to agree with you to get it to pass a 2/3 majority so that the president could be impeached by the House, which does not mean he's impeached. It simply means he's impeached, just like Clinton was not impeached by the Senate, meaning actually kicked out. It had to be 2/3 of both bodies in order to make that decision. And I think it was the right decision, anyway. In order to do that, though, Reid is tipping his hat, as is Mr. Katko, as is Ms. Stefanik, as is the New York State Republican leadership, that we will accept money for votes. And if you really want them bad enough, we have people in other states throughout the country, Ohio, Pennsylvania, California, Florida, who will vote with us if we can Because again, they're spending $3-4 million on non-competitive races to get a $174,000 a year job. So that money's coming from somewhere and expects some sort of return on its investment. Me, I'm running, you know, I'm just an ordinary guy. I haven't really started the collection of money thing yet. I do encourage people, hey, if you like what I'm saying, then don't just say, boy, I support you, that's great, Casey. No, you got to give me a pizza pie worth of money. Okay, $17.99 plus tip, $20. Go to my campaign and do it. But when you do it, you can be doxxed. That means you're standing up out of the blue and basically saying, look at me, I support this, you know, radical businessman who is fed up with the way government is being run. And you do it. So there's a biblical story about a guy that gave up his birthright. He didn't really know what it was, right? He gives it up for a bowl of soup. Man, that was good soup. Later on, he goes, what did I do, right? So what is it that we have consumed, a tiny little thing, free daycare, free education, free medical, or whatever, and given up our birthright as Americans, right? Our birthright to be literally and individually more powerful than our government. The power of John Q. Public, you know, through specifically litigation, to stop a tornado of activities and take as much time as necessary, time travel in other words, to look at individual things and say, you know what, my civil rights were violated there. You owe me money, you know? You know what else? You skipped a number of rules over here, and on and on and on through the list. Not a easy task. You know, this Black Lives Matter, no justice, no peace, you know, kind of thing does not take into account what we can do as individual litigants against our government, you know? So I'm in the midst of all that, as you're aware. Last time we got together, I thought I had an ally in one of our election commissioners. It turned out I did not. And blatant laws were ignored without consequence because it was supported by the judiciary afterwards. And I said, well, fine, then up and up and up through the ranks I went until I argued in front of the New York Court of Appeals. No small task to procedurally do the dance necessary, where you know the minuet and you go 2 steps to the left, 1 step to the right, certain margin, certain font, certain spacing, certain number of pages, etc. To even have that argument heard was a monumental task for a lay individual. But I have this kind of obsessive nature, you know, something I call the constellation effect, where I was walking my dog, looked up, I said, "Where's the Big Dipper?" And I said, "That's unacceptable." You know, 2 weeks later, I could tell you 80 celestial objects and had a certain mastery of the subject matter. Similarly, with election law, I'm developing a genuine mastery of it, as well as an increasing mastery in just plain old pro se lawyering, you know? And there's some things on the horizon that I prefer not to talk about at the moment, but are active litigations against corruption. And there will come a time that if we're unable to get a satisfactory answer from the legal system, that will then generate its own press release. Then, of course, I can flex my press muscle, which includes, hey, you know, and so, in other words, there's a lot of different ways to fight a fight. Politically, through the media, and through the courts. So this race is about each of us taking our personal responsibility to see if this is the government that we want to pass on to the next generation. If we have a problem with the way our government is operating right now, do we pass it on to the millennials and say, they'll take care of it? They're well equipped to take care of it. And the problem is, what happened to the generation that passed leadership on to us? The greatest generation, right? They're fighting World War II, right? These are teenagers jumping out of Higgins boats, right? The ramp comes down on beaches of Normandy, and they're running. My grandfather was on that beach, and he was permanently sunburned for the rest of his life from being, you know, dug up in a hole trying to avoid death while death surrounded him. And this is volunteers fighting a dictator. So they hand us this great, beautiful package of freedom, preserved. And my generation, right, the baby boomers, are all Woodstocky about it, you know? George Carlin, it's terrible, but you can't do anything about it, you know? 1, 2, 3, what are we fighting for? I don't know, I don't give a damn, right? That kind of concept. But these people were wrong. We're still John Q. Public, and we need to show the next generation how to fight. So I look at it 2 different ways. There's 40 and younger and 40 and over, okay? Before you get to be 40, you're trying to find somebody that you really like, build a life with, build a family with, build your career, become established, okay? After 40, hopefully, you're on that slow glide to the grave, slow. But the wings are expanded and you can see to the right and left. I know how to pay my bills. The kids are doing great. Now let me see what's going on in the world. As we become 50, as we become 60, just turned 61 the other day, how do we then assess what's going on and do the corrective actions that we need to do? That's what this race is about. So I'm doing what I can in my spare time, right? So from 2 a.m. to 4 p.m., my spare time, right? And then try to maintain my life in the next 3 hours of the day, right? So I'm a maniac, you know? I'm just absolutely focused on the subject matter. Writing a book, Make Congress Great Again, should be available at the end of this month. The subtitle is Deplorables Guide to controlling politicians. Okay? And it's filled with humor, but also filled with practical things to consider. One thing to consider is to talk to your inner coward, okay? The person that assesses risk. Because government in the hands of corrupt elected officials is used to annihilate political enemies, okay? Something that I call Cuomophobia. Here's Cuomo, as Attorney General, attacking the people in his way of the governorship, right? First you go after Client 9, then you go after the blind guy, and next thing you know, hey, there's no one there running against me. What do you think? Now I'm governor. So that's really not really what the function of government should be about. But I call that Cuomophobia, when a politician uses the power of their office to attack their political enemies. We saw it with Obama. We certainly saw it with the Clintons. We have not seen it with Donald Trump. And I'm very proud that that's the case.
What does the path forward? Obviously, you're really early in the process, but I'm curious, when you're up against someone as established as Congressman Reid, what does the path look like for you to winning a general election? And how do you sort of rally the troops, rally voters around the concept of getting Casey McDonald elected in November 2020?
Well, first off, we have a primary, right? So part of that primary process is to recognize how third parties come into a play, okay? So typically, and the third parties, from my experience, are a scam and a sham, all right? They're not, we already talked about the Conservative Party in Seneca County, where out of the members, some of them are not registered to vote, some of them are not registered to the Conservative Party, some of them are invalids who never even realized that they were part of the committee, all of which proxy to an individual who is under the thumb of a political operative, okay? So we have Tom Reid, for instance, in the Republican Party getting these endorsements from 11 county chairs, all right? The chief spokesman is the woman from the Ontario County Republican Committee. And she is an employee of another politician, okay? So her employment is beholden to the system. She's aware of the problems of Tom Reid and yet spearheaded the endorsement of him, okay? Without deliberation amongst the committees, all right? So the issue of getting elected is an issue of relationship. My relationship to the community at large, by them understanding the issues and verifying the issues, understanding the risks involved in supporting me, but also understanding the rewards. Then each individual committee member should have a relationship with their community. They don't. Many of them don't. Many of them couldn't tell you 3 email addresses of their 117, quote unquote, constituents of their election district, okay? You should have everybody's contact information. You should have a couple people that are willing to volunteer and get a message out. Otherwise, we have something called opt-out versus opt-in politics, okay? Opt-out, saturation, everywhere you live. You're watching a game show, you're watching Wheel of Fortune, and the wheel spin, hey, commercial. Politics, okay? So we press the mute button, we opt out, we go, hey. But then it happens over and over again. Another ad, saturation, radio, television, mailers, auto calls, all this kind of stuff. Nothing has anything to do with a neighbor saying hi to a neighbor, okay? That's opt-in politics. We're on someone's Facebook page. We're following someone's Twitter. We're retweeting, we're liking, we're subscribing, right? Those are the opt-in candidacies. So there's no way I'm winning the primary without opt-in people saying, you're my man, McDonald. Here's a pizza. Here's a pizza for your candidacy. Mm-hmm. And with a pizza, I can beat Tom Reid with his $4 million of his crazy ads by doing what? Gas in the car, tires on the car, motel every now and then, a few tuna fish sandwiches, and we have a campaign, okay? So the question is, how do you win the general? It's the same way that you win the governorship, okay? Because You have to bring something, some value to the people that everyone can agree with. Okay? Transparency is one thing. In Congress right now, it is very difficult to figure out what they voted for. You go to the clerk, it says legislative activity. They give you a spreadsheet. You can click on it. You can see the number of the roll call and how the vote went. You can see the original bill, an HR something or other. But the amendment, you have to do a degree of research to figure out what it is. So the bill might be, 1,000 pages, 2,000 pages, right? And few people actually read it through. That's all committee activity. The amendments, though, are much shorter, a sentence, 2 sentences, okay? But to actually see what the amendment was and what was the discussion on the floor about the amendment. In other words, it sounds good. So here's Ocasio-Cortez putting forth an amendment that $15 million of the general budget should go to the Center for Disease Control to track communicable diseases through needles. Okay? Sounds good. But then what you realize when you listen to the discussion on the floor is it's really a tactic to take more and more money from the discretionary presidential areas, like money he could use towards the wall, and provide redundancy for programs that already exist, that are already funded. The CDC already has that. Meanwhile, all the Republicans are going, no, we're not going to take away money from the wall. But Tom Reid, John Katko, Stefanik, Fitzpatrick, all of these problem solvers are voting with the Democrats. Even though the Democrats have the vote, they're indicating they have a power group that must be kept happy. Keep us happy. We can build our numbers. We can build our numbers. You can get what you want, which is impeachment. And we can get what we want, which is re-election. So my Republican congressman is a geographic representative, not a political representative of my interest and the interest of my Republican neighbors. How do you beat a Democrat in the general election? We already have a 15% head start, is number one. Number two is always be respectful, okay? I can say queer aggression. I have 2 gay kids. I talk to them about it. There's a difference between gay and queer, okay? Gay is, you want to live a certain way with a certain person, that's fine. You'll understand there's no such thing as gay marriage. There's companionship, okay? And somebody's going to do the dishes and somebody's going to take out the trash. What you do behind closed doors is your business. You don't want to know what I'm doing, and I don't want to know what you're doing, okay? And you want to get married, that's fine. Our country allows that, okay? But queer aggression is targeting, again, the kids, the youngest of kids, from nursery school on up to 13 or so. After that, a kid should be able to handle any sort of conversation related to sexuality, right? If you're pubescent, right? If you're older than a bar mitzvah kid, right? Or some Catholic kid that did his confirmation, right? I mean, Christ was in the temple discussing law at 12, right? He had a certain ability in his mental development. We have a certain ability in our mental development at 12 years old to handle predatory agendas of other individuals. You go into the younger kids and it's much tougher, much, much tougher for them to discern who this person is, this teacher, this daycare person, whoever they happen to be. So we need to protect those young kids. But on the opposite end of it, how are they able to do that? It's through the power and the support that they are giving to elected officials, okay? And our government is an example of that. So how do you win? You separate the issues. On the gay issue, which is a big topic, right? You separate between gay and queer. Which of you Democrats are in favor of proselytizing the youth on any subject matter other than the 3 R's, okay? Be kind to one another. Wonderful concept, all right? So, for instance, you don't want to see some born-again Christian talking to the children of a gay couple and having access to that individual and say you have no right to discriminate against a born-again Christian talking to your child during their formative years, right? So how about we follow Pink Floyd's advice? Hey, teachers, leave those kids alone, right? That kind of thing. So how do you win? You win with common sense. Pro-life, right? Pro-choice. Pro-choice is actually pro-panic. All right? Abortion on demand. Billy, I'm pregnant. What are we going to do? Abortion on demand says, don't think about it, just get the damn abortion. Just get it, right? Pro-choice really is giving that individual a lot more information before they make that decision. So winning the general, which includes winning the state as a gubernatorial candidate, is the same thing. How do you expose what's actually going on in government, how it can actually be improved to the benefit of the sustainability of the American dream, okay? And that is through conservative values. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, there are conservative values. It is character, capacity, cash, okay? These are the things that sustain compassion. These are the things that sustain our society. In the absence of any of those, it collapses, okay? So I speak with people all the time. I mean, I am very concerned about being categorized as one of those conservatives that the governor says is not welcome here. Well, quite frankly, he doesn't know who I am, okay? Here's something, Josh. You ready? This is pretty wild. Recently, the governor's brother was called Fredo, and he got really ticked off. He got very reactive, as if somebody flicked him behind the ear and said something. He went all Neanderthal, okay? The truth of the matter is, Andrew is the true Fredo. And let me explain. If the Corleone family is the American dream, the American way, the beautiful thing that needs preserving and protecting, meaning, deliberative, it's the biggest part of our American society, that we talk about things, okay? That we do things according to a specific process, that we don't utilize government to our personal advantage, but to the advantage of the people at large, okay? Our governor has forgotten all those things. He is a one-man show. He is in many ways, a dictator. No one is willing to stand up against him. He sold out that chief component of what makes our country great, and that is discussion. Discussion, okay? Tom Reid won't discuss anything with me. He's been invited. I got to get the League of Women Voters in on it. Anybody out there from the League of Women Voters, give him a phone call. Anyone from these committees, these Republican committees, call the guy up. But I don't have a lot of faith in the Republican committees because they did not criticize their county chairs, who in essence did what that woman did a few weeks ago with Joe Biden. She wore her uniform, right, and endorsed him, okay? Wearing the uniform of an elected person of a Republican committee and endorsing, using those two words together, Republican committee and endorsement, gives a pseudo implication that this is the best hope for Republican idealism to manifest itself in D.C. It's a big fat lie. But none of these committee members are being critical enough of their leadership to make publicly known their dissatisfaction with those decision making. So what I call Rhinos, right? Republicans in name only. The only way that the Rhinos can stay in existence is if the committees are filled with monkeys. Monkeys see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. It's a perversion of Ronald Reagan's 11th commandment. Speak no ill of a fellow Republican. Well, what does that mean? That means we can never be critical of a fellow Republican? So the way that we win in the general is we are critical of our own party, and we invite our opponent to be critical of their party. And we hold the standard that it's we the people and not we the Republicans who are in charge of this government. That the partisanship is in many ways a scam and a means of dividing us. That when we actually look at the individual issues, right? The right to carry, concealed carry. Well, if I'm at a place and they tell me I can't carry a gun, don't disarm me if you can't protect me, right? Wegmans is now saying, don't come in here with a gun. Well, what does that say? That makes it a target, right? So I am certain that if there was ever a situation, God forbid, that I'm in an environment where somebody's, shooting at everybody and I pull out a gun and I get hit, that one of these other people who are so opposed to guns might actually want to pick that up. Might actually want to pick that up and throw bullets downrange, toward the perpetrator. So the point is that at any point that Miss Matrano wants to have a conversation, even at this early stage, how do you win? You talk. Let the best ideas win. Ms. Matrano, you want to have a conversation? Please. I'll reach out to her and make her accountable as I make Tom Reid accountable. Another way is this. I'm not running on a third-party line. I'm not running conservative, independents, green, family, working, who knows what. Why? Because all that would do is dilute the vote in the general election if I lost in the primary. Okay? So now you have a Republican candidate. Let's say I beat Tom Reid, and he's there on 3 other party lines. That's fine. It's up to Republicans to talk to their neighbors, as well as me to talk to everyone, and create this atmosphere of dialogue sufficient to offset his party line on some of these third parties. But I don't think that if we really care about Republican ideals, that we run on multiple party lines, because we have a situation here in Seneca County, in the DA's race, where a candidate who was on the Conservative Party line did not make it on the Republican Party line. So does he run an active campaign and take the Republican vote and divide it, which then would allow the Democrat to succeed? Not a terrible scenario. I happen to know all 3 candidates. I think they're all very capable individuals, okay? However, it shows what can happen with a third party. Like Ralph Nader in Florida gave it to George Bush, okay? Like Ralph Nader gave it to Donald Trump, still Ralph Nader. Then Ross Perot gave it to Bill Clinton by taking votes away from HW, okay? The third parties are a factor. We had Ms. Stein in the Green Party creating a little bit of drama and pulling votes away from Hillary in very key states. So the way that you win is you win in a primary. And the way that you win a primary is you educate people about the pre-primary season, okay? So the importance then of signing a petition for a candidate that you know. In other words, you're making your vote in February that translates to a candidate in November, okay? The vote that you're making in February has 100-to-1 power over the vote you make in November. So part of my candidacy and campaign over the next couple of months will be educating people as to where the fulcrum is in the political system. And it's in the pre-signature of a petition, okay? We need to understand what that process is, and I will be educating that. Right now, again, I'm in the process of a very tough legal battle against corruption, and if it goes my way, it will become big news. It'll send seismic and gravitational waves throughout the legal and the political community of New York State, okay? If I'm not successful with that, then I'll just do my own, press release on the topic. Or I'll choose what to do, because there's many different safety nets under corrupt government, okay, especially in the judiciary. The appeal process, the mesh gets tighter and tighter and tighter, so the issues cannot just fall straight to the ground and collapse. However, they did during the election law proceedings. All of which is just another indication of how lazy we've been as the people who are supposed to be in charge, right? We're having a good life, and we're expecting what? The millennials to take care of it later on down the road. We can't. We have to up our game. And if we up our game properly, it will have implications not just in the legislature, but in the judiciary.
What is the last question I have for you today? What is the call to action and sort of the elevator pitch for those who might be a little bit interested and maybe they're curious about some of the things that you've been talking about in that next 2 to 3 to 4 month window, when I would imagine you've got to really start gearing up and getting things rolling?
Well, the first and foremost is there is no such thing as political change without candidates, okay? So right now I'm a candidate. That's because I say so, all right? But I do have a season coming up where I'm going to need to gather thousands of signatures in all 11 counties in order to qualify to be on the ballot, okay? So the very first call to action is know who I am. Vet me. Don't believe what I say, believe what I've done. Learn about me, okay? And you do that by going to kcmcdonald.com. If you like what you see, guess what? I'm accessible. I have a phone number. I've got an email address. You can mail me a letter. You can invite me to your house with 6 friends. I'll come over and talk, right? There are things that we can do at this juncture that basically says we would like a rigorous debate during the Republican primary of 2020. And we therefore are supporting a candidate who, what we've seen thus far, might be a viable alternative to the guy that's the head of the swing votes in Washington, D.C., the king of the Rhinos, the king of swing. This guy might be better. I'll tell you this right now. Tom Reid is a better candidate than I, but he's a lousy congressman. He's a lousy congressman. I would think I would be a better congressman because I'm a fighter who's not afraid of law, who's not afraid of telling it like it is and telling it directly. Tell me if Tom Reid would ever say queer aggression, right? Would even say that. But it's important to distinguish that that is a key factor in sustaining our society. We need to protect the kids. And we need to identify when special interests are having unfair influence on the policies and the politicians who represent us. So if we want to make a change, we got to give some change. I mean, Tom Reid all day long, all these guys and girls are raising money. They had to raise $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a day to stay elected, according to the new system. All right, according to the old ways, the opt-out ways of saturation ads. But in opt-in, it's much less. We can make 100-to-1 difference. So for the price of a pizza, you're in my database, okay? And your name is there as somebody that is supporting me, okay? That means that you get extra educational materials, extra nudges, extra hellos, extra opportunities to say hello. And in that way, we're talking to our neighbors, neighbor to neighbor, and we're increasing the power of the ordinary citizen to stand up against the machine, the swamp, which is exactly what our president has shown us through his example. And he's saying, I've done it, Casey. You can do it, right? He's saying, you can do it. And I believe I can.